Hello, listeners, from Roy Damari of INSAM, making my second recording with Dr. Alan Bonner, my friend here in Toronto, before I move on to Dallas and then back to Geneva. The topic of my, or shall I say our, ramblings today is Green City, or Green Cities. Toronto is quite high on the list, though by no means top of the list of American and Canadian cities. That honour goes to San Francisco, followed by Vancouver. But I've been working in Russia with a publication about making a green city out of Ekaterinburg. So some of what we're going to talk about today is a reflection of that paper, where a real plan has been put into effect with a university which specializes in forestry and urban planning in the sense of trees and benches and so on that fit into a green city. And the whole thing has now led to a very significant plan in Russia, ahead of other cities in Russia, that Ekaterinburg is going to become, or is becoming, a green city, having only ever been really a concrete jungle. So I'm going to pass over to Alan Bonner, who's going to tell us about his reaction to that paper and what he thinks we should do with it and its implications, perhaps, for other cities.
Well, I think many people say and know that trees are the lungs of the city, but it goes way beyond that. In North America, most of our cities are built on the water because the waterways were our transport system for hundreds of years when the canoe was about the best we could do. And in England, there are canals, and there are canals in other countries of Europe as well. So, one of the things that we have to recognize is that large population areas abut the water, and I think the water should become our transport system again. The water is also a danger even without climate change factored in. Most of the emergencies in many cities that abut water have to do with either snow or rain or floods or what have you. So the trees not only help purify the air, but they retain a lot of soil and they are the solution to flooding. In Boston, many streets aren't passable during rains unless they're pumped out. Many hundreds of miles of expressways are under the floodplain. So the tree can at least reduce that a little bit. Boston, by the way, has an excellent climate change report commissioned by the mayor, hundreds of pages long. They have built a park that has natural drainage in it. And they really have some challenges. They don't have garages for many of their ambulances. So in a snow event, the ambulance can't even get out of the snowbank. Baltimore talks about heat days. Again, if there is climate change, and even if there isn't, there are many dozens of heat days that are dangerous for people with respiratory problems or older people. And guess what the solution to that is? The tree canopy and the shade, which will reduce the temperature. Now, if there isn't a place to plant the trees, flower boxes, roofs, and stoops will all serve the purpose, creating many hundreds of acres, a little flower pot at a time. So the tree and vegetation are very big deals in cities to help reduce the heat island and retain water and just make a nicer city.
Certainly, in the case of Ekaterinburg, the plan has been put together by a university devoted to forestry and forest engineering. So they are obviously stressing trees and the use of wood in furniture, for example, throughout the city. But a lot of what you've just said then links in with your other work on safety in cities and making sure there are evacuation plans in the event of an emergency. And so we see a kind of continuity between our talk about green cities and your work on city evacuation plans.
Well, absolutely. And again, with the theme being a greener, nicer, environmentally friendly city is its own reward. But if one did something, as you propose in the Ekaterinburg research that you're doing, you did something along the lines of what exists in the Gatineau Hills outside of our capital city, Ottawa, where every now and then along the cross-country ski trail is a warming hut made out of wood, with a wood-burning stove in it. You get in, have your lunch, enjoy your ski trip, and go back skiing. If you had that sort of a chain of facilities through the park system, in Toronto we have a ravine system. You mentioned how green Vancouver is, Stanley Park, 600 or so acres, I think. So if you have these facilities every so often, and you have a drinking fountain, and you have park benches, guess what? During an evacuation, that will save people's lives, because if people are in the wrong shoes, if their feet get wet, if they have mobility challenges, they will be in peril in an evacuation. With benches, water fountains, warming huts, they can probably make it.
We have to pass all this on again to the Ekaterinburg research team, because some of these aspects of evacuation, and I love your idea of the ski runs, I don't think they've thought of that. What they have thought of is, or observed, is that despite it being a concrete jungle, within the city of Ekaterinburg are a number of parks, and they call them urban forests, but I guess urban woodlands might be a better idea. Just groups of trees, more or less left untouched. You can walk in them, but they are not pleasant. They're not done up. They don't have benches. And that is part of the plan, to encourage the people to go out and use what is already there, and to expand what's already there, because they have certainly identified areas where they can make a bigger woodland or urban woodland, and make a park more attractive.
Well, cautionary tale though, we need to look at what species of trees will be thriving 50 years from now with perhaps less water or more urban pollution or an environment that has changed somewhat. Many of these means of beautifying the urban forest are quite inexpensive. If you put a shovel in the ground and dig up a sapling and move it 10 feet out into the light, you're reforesting an area, or you're increasing the forest at a very limited expense. You also can have multiple purposes for these benches we're talking about. There have been some experiments in Japan where you open up an urban bench and inside is a barbecue. So that if there is an emergency where you can't cook, an earthquake, there's an earthquake every week in Tokyo, as you know, you open up some of these urban benches and there are survival materials inside, whether it be cooking or water, emergency gear, first aid kits, what have you. They can also be a gathering point. New Orleans has done this. When you have to evacuate, where do you go? They went to the Superdome in New Orleans, even though it wasn't an evacuation center. But what is needed is a gathering place to get on urban buses and get out of the jurisdiction if it's dangerous. Well, they have now urban sculptures that also serve not only as street art, but as the gathering place, and a wooden structure in Ekaterinburg could serve that purpose as well.
Yes, we've got some lovely pictures of something that looks a bit like a totem pole, with carvings apparently of the tribes that used to live on the Ural Mountains there.
Well, they can also be, of course, a cultural artifact as well. So back to the theme that a safer, more environmentally friendly city is also just a better city.
And we've already stressed roofs, or mentioned roofs in our talk, and roofs can be used with some soil, I presume, to have some grass growing and trees growing, and that's a great underused resource in many cities. Certainly is underused in Ekaterinburg. That's something to move forward on. And when one looks at green spaces and we speak about hectares of greenery, we should remember that on a micro level, balconies and flower pots are all part of that contribution to the green space in the city and the purification of the air that goes on because of flowers and trees and shrubs.
Well, you've reminded me of the great doo-wop American group, the Drifters, who had a hit song in the early 60s, Up on the Roof. And that's what people in urban areas did before mass air conditioning was installed. In the hot days of summer, they would go up on the roof and enjoy the view. It was probably dangerous. It's against building codes now. But that is a handmade, homespun solution to the heat. In Baltimore, people also used to sleep out in the park. If that can be made safe with displays by fire, police, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Girl Guides, etc. Why not use the parks as a refuge for the heat if it's safe? Retrofit roofs with railings and so on, make them safe, and use that huge urban area, the disused area on roofs.
Yeah, it's huge. Now, there's another dimension to making a city green, which I think we ought to mention before we complete this recording, and that is the enthusiasm that one can generate in the population, how to pull off a project to green or greenify a city. In the case of Ekaterinburg, they certainly called upon the local university, the Forest Engineering University, to put together the plan. But that involved many disciplines, from urban planning through to understanding which trees survive better and so on, how to make a decent wooden furniture last. But in all this, apart from the technical expertise, it was essential that the local government, in this case the city government, be enthusiastic, give the required budget to do it, and that it spread down not just from above, as it were, but it go right throughout the citizens of the city, that they enthuse about making their city green.
Two other groups that need to be involved. One is industry, that they may be market gardens, they may be forest products companies, but there will be industries that will sponsor some of this to do good works in the city in which they operate. And secondly, schools. I've been involved, I'm a trained teacher, and I've been involved in programs that help educate students about environmental matters. You have to get this into the official curriculum. If you send material out to teachers, no teacher will refuse material. They're all pack rats, love to have stuff in a drawer in the classroom. But if it's official curriculum about the environment or about climate or about vegetation, then the students will learn something. They will take seedlings, saplings, flower pots home. They will help green the roof of the school. They will help green the school grounds. And that spreads it through a city very, very quickly.
Good. So start young and get this enthusiasm up, this commitment from the urban dwellers that they can turn their city into a green city. We'll watch what's happening in Ekaterinburg, and we'll try and together, Alan, to put together some more publications of perhaps a more general style than academic style, to see if we can spread the word and even share the experience of a Russian city with North American cities.
Fantastic.
Good. We'll speak to you again, or I'll speak to you again next week. And in the meantime, I thank Dr. Alan Bonner for sharing this broadcast with me. We wish all listeners a very happy Christmas.